Hey everybody, Bonehead for the Bonehead podcast, and welcome to Top 5 Friday. Every Friday we get together and we have a look at the top 5 something, probably to do with Blood Bowl. Now we're carrying on with our top third-party alternative teams for Blood Bowl, and today we're going to be looking at the Dark Elves. So we put a post up on our socials and we get some absolutely brilliant suggestions from all of you out there, and from that we compile it and put a little bit of Ben bias on it and pick our top 5. So onwards to top 5 Dark Elf teams. Now, before we really leap into the teams, I think it's fair for us to talk about the Dark Elf team. It is a really great team, and if you picked up the Dungeon Bowl box set, you'll have another 2 sprues, 1 sprue, another 1 sprue of them. The kit is brilliant. The models look fantastic. They are probably some of the better Games Workshop Blood Bowl sculpts, and all of the Games Workshop teams, all of them, look really good. The problem with the Dark Elf team is there's a couple of tricky bits to build, so it's definitely one to watch out for. I think we always bring it back to like the separate thumb for the Witch Elf. So even though the Dark Elf team is, in my opinion, one of the better looking Games Workshop teams, I can definitely see people wanting some alternatives. But we've got those for you. So let's begin with number 5. And number 5 is Star Player Miniatures Dark Elf team. Now, I don't really know if this team exists anymore, which is a really challenging point on this list, so I do apologise. However, it was really important to include it because if you look at the models, they're flipping brilliant. Now, some manufacturers, they have like a bit more of a true scale vibe to them, where they're a little bit taller than the Games Workshop models. They're just, I mean, this is Primaris before Primaris was a thing for those 40k players out there. And actually, you know what? They look really cool. They've got the classic tropes of Dark Elves, right? You've got the kind of jaggedy, segmented armour. That tends to be a real key design aesthetic of Dark Elves. And also cone head helmets, but less obnoxiously than High Elf teams. It harkens back to, I don't know, Warhammer for 3rd edition, probably, where Dark Elves and High Elves really kind of gained their identity, which was ported into Blood Bowl in Blood Bowl 2nd edition, where I think that was when you had the first of the metal models. There was like some individual Dark Elf players, and then it carried on to 3rd edition Blood Bowl, where you had the Nagaroth Nightmares metal box set and you had the High Elf box set of metal, and it was really kind of solidified at that point what makes a Dark Elf team, and it is very much segmented armor, pretty wicked boots, and the cone heads, and this team has got all of that. Now, like I said, I don't know if it's available, and the reason for that is because the only place I can find it is Comixinononos, and that is a site that is, well, it's out of stock, but it's looking at £80 for a team of 16 models, including all of your positionals. So you're good to go. If this team is available, it's a really good one to have on the top 5 list, and I couldn't not put it on there. So number 5, Star Player Miniatures. Number 4, it's Weyer Games, The Misunderstood Sons. So this was a Kickstarter that was, middle of last year maybe? What's the years are like these days. When did that close? Don't know. Anyway, we got to look at the teams, basically. It was a Kickstarter that had both High Elves and Dark Elves, a theme that you're going to see throughout this video because they kind of are two sides to the coin, and they maxed out the positionals. Now, Weyer Games have got, I think they call it Morgue Grey, I don't know, this kind of resin that's just fantastic. Ever since I saw one of their first teams, it's been really evident that their casting process, this is not a 3D printed team, this is not a metal team, this is a resin team. That is cast in the old ways, and the material that they use gives an incredibly crisp outcome. So there are some resin teams out there that can be a bit rubbery, that can be a bit soft. This more grey stuff that they use is some of the best resin I think we've ever seen. Now, onwards to the actual team, you've got some very cool assassins, and this was one of the things I really loved about the team when it dropped. the assassins themselves, you know, they've got like the skull motifs, you've got the daggers, you've got the cloaks, you've got the hoods, you've got a couple of witch elves that are just menacing without being ridiculous, which is a massive boon and something you definitely have to look out for when you're looking for witch elf players for a dark elf team. And then you've got the blitzers, and the cool thing that Where Games did, they gave you 2 different styles of sets of blitzers. So you need 4 blitzers for a dark elf team. That's 2 Games Workshop boxes or 1 third-party box, more than not. And they went with 2 ways. They gave you the kind of the warrior route. So these guys look like Malekith, the Dark Elf King. They've got kind of regal helms, they've got the spikes, they've just look like scary alignment. It's perfect, it fits the aesthetic really well. But they also went and did some Corsair versions. The runners are cool too. They've got a really lovely set of models here. And here we go. Just looking at the kind of the traits of the Dark Elf team, you've got the Conehead and you've got the jaggedy segmented armor. So absolutely bang on. Like, it just gets Dark Elves right, which is wonderful to see. I want to show off the other guys. So there's 2 different sets, basically. Most of the models are the same. They've just got alternative blitzers. Here we go. This is what we want to look at. And the reason that's important is because Dark Elves in the olden times, they had the City Guard, which was basically the Dark Elf version of the Loathen Sea Guard, where you had some crossbow boys and some spear boys, and you had the cone helms and the spiky bit on the front. Then there were the Corsairs, and the Corsairs landed in Warhammer 6th edition. It was a cool plastic kit, and this formed many, many Dark Elf teams for a long time. And then you had the high sea boots, and then you had these frilled heads, and that's exactly what this style is leaning towards. And it matches up really nicely with the Games Workshop aesthetic without being a complete clone, and I'm a big fan of that. So you've got these 2 different versions of the blitzers, where you've got kind of like the Dark Elven Prince helmets, and you've got the Corsair helmets too. Now, I'm not sure if the team is available for general release, as the Kickstarter is still going, or not going, but is still shipping, but it was a very reasonable price for the Kickstarter point of view, and it's probably going to end up about £80 to order the team of 16, which is, when you're looking for third-party teams, exactly where you want to be. So, that is the Misunderstood Sons, Corsairs. Oh, clever. There you go. There you go. Anyway, Where Games Dark Elf team. On to number 3, and our first 3D printed element of this list. It is the Dark Elf Corvus team from Ugni. So Ugni kind of entered the Patreon world middle of last year and have dropped some really lovely teams, including this Dark Elf team. Now, I think they've done good things. They have done good things, so you can kind of flip through the pictures here, which always makes our lives a little bit easier. So, this is a Corvus-themed team. So, they've gone Dark Elves, but they've given it a kind of vampire masquerade, kind of gothic renaissance style, where you've got all the elements that you'd expect from a Blood Bowl team, but they're just built with really fine filigree and these cool Dark Elf crow masks across there as your motif, and it's really cool to see. Now, the way that Ugni do their renders, they look like statues. It's really cool, but the models are actually really, really good. And I'm not just saying that because we have them on the shop. We have them on the shop because they're really good. That's how it works. But each of the models, I'm not going to say it, but each of the models are very, very good. And the Witch Elves are done brilliantly. They're not over the top. They're not ridiculous. They look like Blood Bowl players, and they look like Witch Elves. It's fantastic. And then you've got the Blitzers. Now, the Blitzers are kind of cool. They look like the kind of villain that Spawn would fight against. They're kind of, I don't know, if Tim Burton designed a Dark Elf team, it would be something like this. And it's not crazy. It is not outlandish, but it is stylized. So they do have the kind of beak helms, and there's a bit of a feather motif in there as well. So there's a lot to paint, which is wonderful. Or you can just be a cheeky contrast boy like me and woo, just chuck on the brown and pick out the details. But it's cool. I love it. I really like the team. There is definitely that bird motif, so it is stylized, but it is excellently executed. Really big fan of that one. That's number 3, Ugni's Corvus team. Number 2, it's our friends at Grebo Games. Now, this team, what I should probably call out, is called the Obsidian Dust team. And it's probably one of the most famous third-party Dark Elf teams out there. Not because of the actual Dark Elf team, but because of the Flaming Tree Man. So the way Grebo operates when it comes to, well, the old days, now they just do outrageously good Kickstarters. They would produce a team that could be several teams, and they'd give different bundles. It's really common in the third-party market, right? Well, they produced this Kickstarter, and they had the elves, and the elves were kind of wood elves, because they had this flaming tree. Now, that's very cool, but what that does mean is you would have seen this team if you'd been to a tournament that allows third-party models, because it's kind of like one of the better third-party teams just in general from the last age. Okay, I'd probably say pre-2020, this is just peak third-party team. And it is classic Dark Elf, but they've got this really cool, like, edging on the armor that just makes them look more advanced. Now, the models themselves are flatter because these were originally produced in metal, so they're kind of a little bit more of the old school posing. But I don't think anyone cares when your team looks like this, because if you're going to lazy boy paint it, you use a purple contrast, you pick out bits with gold, and you're ready to go, because there's so much cool detail that you can kind of go hard or you can go soft on it, and you end up with a really great looking team. Now, I've seen a bunch of these in real life, which is really cool. So when I thought of the top third-party teams, I was like, right, which ones have I seen at tournaments? And the Obsidian Dust team comes up really regularly because it is just excellently done. The poses are standard. Nothing here is outrageously over the top. It is just clean design, perfectly executed, which quite frankly is what you can expect from Grebo every single time. And when it comes to these third-party lists, that's why Grebo sit on most of them, is because when they do something, they do it properly. And you know that if you're going to pick up this team, you're going to get a whole bunch of cool sculpts, and the blitzers with the skull masks, just really, really, really cool as well. And I am a huge fan of this team. $89.99 in Greeblood, which is their resin, so it's not metal anymore, it is resin, and that's going to get you all the players that you need. And quite frankly, it is a fantastic Dark Elf team. But number one, by votes and a little bit of Ben bias, I think, on this one, is the Blacksale Corsairs. So this is from Punga. I don't think this is on general sale yet, but I'm sure it won't be very long. And this is from their last Kickstarter. And their last Kickstarter was also a Dark Elf versus High Elf thing. We waited ages for a wicked Dark Elf team, and then all of a sudden they all just started cropping up. And it just means that there's so much choice. So the reason I've given this one a slight edge is because it is way more modern. The sculpts are way more modern, and the overall vibe fits in with the Games Workshop aesthetic a little bit more. So this is, honestly, this could be like a 3-4-way tie, and that's the awesome thing about doing this model, these videos, is because I'm like, which order am I going to put it in? Doesn't matter. I'm going to upset somebody, it's going to be wrong somehow, but ultimately that means that we all win. Now, the reason I love this team is because I have probably got a little bit of recency bias, but they are a little bit fiddly to build. They come in multiple parts, which is a bit of a pain. However, those parts are beautifully cast, beautifully sculpted, beautifully produced, and when put together, they come up with some of the finest Blood Bowl models I think I've ever used. So the High Elf team and the Dark Elf team, we were lucky enough to be able to get like a cheeky review video on. As you can see, I actually backed it because I was like, I need this team for myself. And it's just phenomenal. Like, can I? Yes, I can. There we go. I'm not going to scroll down the Kickstarter bit. I think I'm just going to go and use this video here. But they have executed the Dark Elf design. Now, they've gone the Corsair route. And this is something that harkens back to the really well done Games Workshop one. You've got the Sea Dragon cloaks. So the Sea Dragon cloaks were such an important part of Dark Elf Corsairs in Warhammer. It makes so much sense that it's transferred over to this edition. And maybe in the future, if we see a Sea Elf team, we'll see a little bit more of that. But this takes that Dark Elf pirate theme, which is a very Punga thing to do, and just goes for it. And you've got some wicked Blitzer sculpts. You've got some brilliant Witch Elf sculpts. And every single one of the linemen are just brilliant models. And then you've got the assassins. Now, the assassin is an interesting role on the Dark Elf teams. I actually think it's got better in this edition. It just feels a bit better. That movement 7's pretty good, and that stab is just so useful when there are so many high-profile, low-armor targets. Hackflem, I'm looking at you here. And actually that means that the stabby stab guy is really cool. And this is the best pair of assassin models I've seen. The team is beautiful. It's executed brilliantly. Now, like I said, it's not available for general release at the moment, but it won't be long, and it will be about the same price as the other teams, pushing 80, 90 pounds. And ultimately, I'm going to do that really boring bit again, guys, and I'm really sorry here, is that every single one of these teams is just awesome. And that's the cool thing about combining these top fives. And a massive thank you to everyone out there who jumps in and says, hey, don't forget this team, or what about this team, what about this team? I guess I've got two final thoughts when it comes to Dark Elves. One is look at your choice, and these are just the ones that we've picked to show out. Okay, you've got the Punga one that's got the Corsair theme. You've got the Obsidian Dust team, which does really well as any kind of elf team, but is really well designed. You've got Wear Games, who have a very similar theme. You've got the Corvus team with the cool kind of beaky, different gothic crow vibe, which I actually think is a really nice take on it. That's not just kind of like, you know, standard Games Workshop lore. So, like, just in the top of the teams that we've picked out, you know, it depends what you want. If you want it right now, you can have that team or this team. If you've got a 3D printer, you can get this team. You're kind of spoiled for choice at this point. The second thing to mention about the Dark Elf team is there's a couple of Dark Elf teams I've not featured on the video because when it comes to sculpting, some players, some companies get a little bit carried away. And we do want this to be a family-friendly show because actually we just support more people playing more Blood Bowl because more Blood Bowl is more better. So if you're looking for Dark Elf teams, watch out. There may be a couple that may be unsuitable for children, primarily because of the Witch Elves. But I think you'll agree every single one of these teams has just got Witch Elves that look awesome and dangerous, and Assassins that look awesome and dangerous, and they're just awesome and dangerous. Anyway, let me know if we've missed any teams out you really love, or which ones of these teams you are a big fan of. And yeah, nice to be back making some videos. We'll be back soon with more Blood Bowl content. Happy blocking. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to support the channel even further, please like and subscribe. It really does help us out. Or come join us on YouTube Members or in Patreon, where you can get exclusive access to some content, some loot, early access to basically everything we do, as well as regular competitions. Or you can pick up some Bonehead Podcast loot either on our website at boneheadpodcast.com. We've got the Dungeon Bowl things, we've got tokens and stuff like that, or on our Spreadshirt site as well. Everything you do just helps us make more content and hopefully do it of better quality. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Happy blocking.